Somewhere in the forests of northern Canada, half a kilometer beneath a mat of fallen soil and roots, a slab of bedrock was waiting. It had been waiting for centuries, maybe longer, and what was carved into its surface the moment it was exposed to light again should not exist. Not here, not in this language, not by any hand we can account for. This is not a fringe claim buried in an obscure corner of the internet. The inscription has been examined by specialists, it has been authenticated, the carvings are real, the age has been measured, and the text has been translated. And what that text says, and the writing system used to say it, creates a problem so fundamental that the mainstream account of who was in North America and when cannot fully contain it. Stay with this. By the end, the inscription itself is almost the least interesting part. The question of who carved it and what they knew and how they got there leads somewhere that the official story has no comfortable answer for. The discovery happened the way a lot of uncomfortable things happen. By accident. A storm tore through a dense stretch of forest outside the small town of Wawa in northern Ontario, roughly 465 miles northwest of Ottawa. A tree went down. Its root system tore free from the bedrock underneath, pulling away layers of compressed soil that had not seen light in an unknown number of centuries. A local man walking through the aftermath looked down and saw something in the exposed rock. Lines. Deliberate, repeating, organized lines. What he had found was a slab, roughly 4 by 5 feet in surface area, covered in over 250 carved symbols. 255. To be precise, arranged in structured rows with the kind of intentional spacing that does not happen by accident or erosion. Alongside the main inscription was a carving of a boat. 16 additional symbols are placed separately from the central text, and 14 X-shaped marks whose meaning no one has determined. Archaeologists were brought in, then the runic specialists. Because the symbols were not random, they were not decorative, they were letters. Specifically, they were Elder Futhark runes, the oldest known form of the runic alphabet, originating among Germanic peoples somewhere between the 2nd and 8th centuries AD. A writing system that flourished in Northern Europe, appeared on weapons and burial stones and carved wood, and then largely faded from practical use as the medieval period advanced. By roughly 1100 to 1300 AD, knowledge of how to read Elder Futhark had largely dissolved. It became a relic, a dead script, lost to common use for centuries until Norwegian philologists painstakingly reconstructed it in the 1800s, and carved into a Canadian rock face in a language that was already ancient before anyone in Europe had set foot on this continent by any official account, was the full text of the Lord's Prayer. Read that again. The entire Lord's Prayer. Rendered in an alphabet that supposedly no living person knew how to use when Columbus was still a child. The specialists who authenticated this were not looking for mystery. They examined every line, every stroke, every sequence under difficult field conditions. Their conclusion was that the text was genuine Elder Futhark, accurately rendered, and that the combination of this specific alphabet with this specific Christian text had almost no precedent anywhere in the known historical record. The alphabet predated Christianity by centuries. Pairing them together was not a thing that was done. And yet someone did it, somewhere in the wilderness of northern Ontario. And then the ground swallowed it. Here's where the official explanations begin, and where they begin to develop problems. The first instinct is Vikings. We know the Norse reached North America. The settlement at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland has been dated to 1021 AD with remarkable precision. Norse explorers were using this alphabet. Norse communities had, in some form, Christian influences by the late Viking age. It feels like an obvious fit. But the fit falls apart geographically. L'Anse aux Meadows is on the northeastern tip of Newfoundland. The Wawa Stone is hundreds of miles inland, deep in the continental interior, nowhere near any documented Norse route. There is no historical evidence, no artifact trail, no corroborating site that places Viking presence anywhere near this region. The explanation requires the Norse to have penetrated deep into the Canadian interior by an entirely undocumented path, leaving nothing behind except this single inscription. The second hypothesis involves a Swedish polymath named Johannes Buros, who in the early 16th century revived Elder Futhark in his esoteric studies and adapted it into a personal system paralleling his own language. If the carver was a Swede familiar with Buros's work, that would explain the alphabet. But it creates an equal and opposite problem. No Swedes were in this part of Canada in the early 1600s. The nearest documented Swedish colonial presence in North America was New Sweden, established in 1638 on the Delaware River, thousands of kilometers away. This hypothesis requires an undocumented Swede with specialist knowledge of a deliberately obscure and esoteric writing system to have traveled alone or in secret into the deep Ontario wilderness and carved an entire prayer into bedrock, then disappeared without a trace. Both explanations require us to accept a hidden presence that left no other mark, no tools, no campsite, no secondary artifacts, nothing but the stone. Now look at what the science actually confirmed. Luminescence surface exposure dating was used to measure the age of the carvings. The principle behind it is straightforward. Rock holds energy from its time underground. When the surface is carved away, fresh mineral grains are exposed to sunlight for the first time, and they begin slowly releasing that stored energy. By comparing the energy levels of the carved lines against the untouched surrounding rock, researchers can calculate roughly when the carving happened. The result was not modern. The minimum age returned by the analysis was 200 years. Some samples suggested older, not medieval, not Viking age, but definitely not recent. Definitely not explainable as a prank or a hoax. Centuries old, carved by someone for reasons unknown, who then left nothing else behind. And then there is the detail that keeps surfacing, and that the standard explanations consistently fail to address. The stone was buried, not lightly covered by leaf litter and time. Buried under compressed soil deep enough that it took a major storm and the uprooting of a mature tree to expose it. Whether it was deliberately hidden or simply accumulated the weight of centuries above it, the effect is the same. Someone carved this, and it vanished from the surface of the earth. No one passed it down. No community pointed to it. No oral record seems to reference it. It simply ceased to be visible and waited. The Hudson's Bay Company theory attempts to bridge some of these gaps. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the company employed people from across northern Europe, including Scandinavians, who traveled deep into the Canadian interior and sometimes spent long periods in isolated trading posts. It is theoretically possible that one such individual, somehow in possession of Elder Futhark knowledge, rare enough that professional scholars hadn't fully reconstructed it yet, made his way to this remote location and committed an entire prayer to stone. But the nearest known Hudson's Bay posts were still hundreds of miles from the discovery site, across terrain that was genuinely hostile to travel. And the carving is not rough. It is not the work of someone scratching symbols from imperfect memory in a desperate hour. It is precise, organized, the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The level of expertise required and the distance from any documented presence of people who might possess it make this theory the most grounded of the available options and still deeply unsatisfying. So here is where the thinking has to expand. Because every hypothesis that stays within the accepted framework of who was in North America and when runs into the same wall, the known story does not have room for this stone. The Norse were here, but not here. The Swedes were here, but not yet and not there. The Hudson's Bay workers were here, but barely and without the knowledge, and no one under any of these scenarios explains the burial. Someone placed this text into a surface, and that surface was swallowed by the earth, and the inscription survived intact for centuries without anyone finding it, without anyone knowing to look. What if the failure of every proposed exclamation point to something the official timeline simply has not accounted for? What if European presence in the interior of North America predates anything currently in the record by a margin we have not been willing to seriously consider? The inscription is not degraded, the Elder Futhark is accurate, the prayer is complete. Whoever made this was not guessing at a half-remembered alphabet. They knew it. They knew it well enough to render it cleanly into stone in the middle of a wilderness that the official story says no one reached for centuries. And there is one more detail that does not feature prominently enough in the standard discussion: the boat. Carved alongside the inscription, clearly intentional, simplified in form but unmistakably resembling a Scandinavian vessel. Not an abstract mark, not a geometric pattern, a boat. Whoever was here arrived by water, or thought of themselves as a people of water, or was asking for something from the journey still ahead. Combined with the 14 unexplained X marks and the 16 separate rune symbols placed apart from the main text as though they carry a different category of meaning, what survives in this stone is not a casual act of boredom. This is a document, an intentional, structured, carefully executed document placed into rock in a specific location by someone who expected it to last. The mystery is not just who carved it. The mystery is what they knew about where they were and how they got there. It is what knowledge of an allegedly dead alphabet was doing in the hands of someone who reached the interior of North America before history says it was possible. It is what the boat means, and where it came from, and where it was going. The stone is still there, still in the forest outside Wawa. Its symbols still catch the light at the same angle they did the day they were carved, however many centuries ago that was. The question of who left it has no clean answer. The question of what else they left or where else they went has not been seriously asked. Maybe it should be. Give me your thoughts in the comments, and please like and subscribe to our content so we can bring you more mysteries from history's dark corners.